Hi there, I'm your host Mr. Doyle, and this is a great undertaking. In this series I am discussing Stephen King's The Stand, and in this specific video we'll be taking a look at the 1994 TV miniseries of the same name. The Stand is an epic adventure that was deserving of a screen adaptation, capable of capturing the vast scope and scale of the novel while doing justice to what is considered by many to be King's greatest work. This was a considerable challenge, however, in my estimation, the series is one of the most beloved King adaptations to date. And that's no small task, considering there are approximately 5,027,619 of them. History and background. Adapting The Stand for the screen was a years-long process of false starts, writing and revising scripts, all while changing formats, studios, and directors numerous times throughout the various stages of production. Suffice it to say that the journey to getting this sucker greenlit was nearly as harrowing as the story itself. Initially, King and frequent partner in crime, legend of horror films George Romero, had begun contemplating making a feature-length film in the late 70s. However, due to a variety of reasons, the film never came to be. King and Romero turned down several studio offers to make the film and began to devise a plan to use the money they made from the movie Creepshow to independently fund The Stand in conjunction with Laurel Entertainment. Plans for both Creepshow and The Stand were announced in 1980, however the success of Creepshow in 1982 caught the eye of Warner Brothers, who placed The Stand into development with a budget of $15 to $25 million. Warner Brothers wanted to make a 2-hour feature-length film, however the script King had initially submitted was closer to 6 hours. King revised the script into a 2-film series that totaled 4 hours, which was then revised into a single 3-hour film. By the time the script was finalized in 1986, Romero was no longer a part of the conversation, due in part to his hesitancy to put his name on a King movie because of the poor box office performance of numerous King adaptations during the 80s, and additionally due to conflicts that led him to part ways with Laurel Entertainment. To be honest, I'm grateful that the King-Romero version of The Stand never came to fruition. Because if the Creepshow movie teaches us anything, it's that when King and Romero work together, the results can be more than just a bit campy. Don't get me wrong, Creepshow is a fun time, but the tone and serious approach required to bring The Stand to the screen may have been beyond the reach of King and Romero at that time. The Stand was placed on the back burner for a few years until the success of Pet Sematary in 1989 reignited the King film adaptation craze, and suddenly The Stand was back on the table. Long story short, numerous versions of the script were written and revised by King, as well as other screenwriters, but The Stand was simply too much content to condense into a feature-length film, a realization that somehow took everyone involved more than a decade to admit to themselves for some reason. In 1992, despite his hesitation to make The Stand a TV series, King came to terms with the fact that a movie just wasn't going to happen, at least not in a way that would do justice to the novel. King submitted a script to ABC, who gave the project the green light only a few days later. Additionally, ABC agreed to be less strict regarding standards and practices so as not to detract from King's vision and to ensure that the audience was not disappointed with the series. Once again, King revised the script a half a dozen more times, and a director was decided on. Brian De Palma, the director for the original Carrie film, was considered. However, King decided to go with Mick Garris, who he was working with on the movie Sleepwalkers at the time. King preferred Garris in the director's chair and described him as more of a medium who was less likely to alter the story or its message. Garris signed on for the project and was enthusiastic about the massive scale and scope of the screenplay. Finally, filming began in 1993 in Utah with a not insignificant budget of $26 million. However, the budget was quickly whittled away, leaving only $6 million for each 2-hour episode. Filming took place over a 6-month period using a 16mm camera in what was described as a guerrilla filmmaking style. The The production encountered a number of unforeseen setbacks and complications, including but not limited to Utah's coldest winter in over 100 years, freezing rain, stunted corn crops, gay rights protests, and the challenges of shooting scenes in the sex offender wing of an active prison. Ratings and reception. The miniseries was met with a mostly positive reception at the time of its release, though there were some reasonable criticisms levied against it. Upon airing in May of 1994, all 4 parts of the series were viewed by approximately 19 million homes. The Stand was nominated for 6 Primetime Emmy Awards, of which it won 2. Critic John O'Connor at the New York Times wrote, quote, "A great deal of time and money has gone into this production, and it's right up there on the screen. The nagging problem at the heart of The Stand is that once the story settles early on into its schematic oppositions of good versus evil, sweet old Mother Abigail versus Satanic Flag, monotony begins to seep through the superstructure. Muddled certainly, but The Stand is clever enough to keep you wondering what could possibly happen next." Unquote. The miniseries currently maintains favorable scores on Rotten Tomatoes and IMDb, with a 70% tomato meter reading and a 7.2 out of 10 respectively. Is it by the book? When I'm preparing for a series, I always start by rereading the book before diving into the various adaptations so that the original story is fresh in my mind. And it was honestly shocking this time to see just how closely King's screenplay managed to stick to the novel, especially considering the innumerable rewrites, reiterations, and rehashes he had to do in the years before the series actually came to fruition. Sure, the miniseries has a few tweaks and changes, but the vast majority of the series feels like a strict retelling rather than an imagined or reworked version, which is so often the case. I honestly don't have that much to say in this section. Is it by the book? For the most part, yeah, it's about as close as one could hope to get, at least within this medium. Cast and acting. Seeing as how there are so many characters, I'm going to give my rapid-fire thoughts on the vital characters, while only looking at a couple of characters a little more closely. The protagonists. Gary Sinise does well in the role of Stu Redman, but my teleprompter's frozen, and I don't know what it says after this, so I'm gonna stop talking. Cut. Gary Sinise does well in the role of Stu Redman and delivers a faithful representation of the character. Molly Ringwald was cast in the role of Franny Goldsmith, and while I'm not a huge fan of this character, honestly, Molly does okay in the role. Adam Stork made a great Larry Underwood, and his shift from obnoxious prick to admirable hero was well done. Ray Walston as Glenn Bateman was a great casting choice and an excellent representation of the character. A baby-faced Rob Lowe delivers a solid performance as Nick Andros. Bill Fagerbaki is incredible as Tom Cullen and easily delivers one of the series' most memorable performances. Peter Van Norden as Ralph Brentner was just how I pictured him when reading the novel. Excellent casting. Stephen King made his customary cameo as Teddy Wyzak, and he performed admirably. And finally on our list of protagonists is Ruby Dee as Mother Abigail Fremantle. Ruby Dee herself had said that she was made for the role of Mother Abigail, and I have to agree with her. I've frankly never seen an actor so entirely embody a character and portray them with such pinpoint accuracy. She provides a thorough, dynamic performance. She can be sweet and kind, but she can also be foreboding and commanding. Mother Abigail is very nearly the most memorable of the series' multitude performers, second only to Fagerbaki's Tom Cullen. Fagerbaki? Fagerbaki. Fog your broccoli. The antagonists. Laura San Giacomo does a decent job as Nadine Cross, but her mousy cuteness wasn't as intimidating as I'd like such a pivotal dark character to be. Miguel Ferrer is great as Lloyd Henreid. He pivots well from unhinged madman into Satan's mob boss mode. Corin Nemec made a great Harold Lauder, despite the fact that he doesn't exactly fit the description of the novel. Matt Frewer just kills it as the trash can man. Shawnee Smith is super obnoxious as Julie Lawry, so she absolutely nailed it. Basketball legend Kareem Abdul-Jabbar was the worst actor in the series as the Monster Shouter, and while he wasn't necessarily an antagonist, his terrible performance was enough to land him in the bad guy category. Last but far from least, we have Jamie Sheridan as Randall Flagg. Sheridan was a lesser-known actor at the time he was cast as Randall Flagg, and while he wasn't anyone's first choice, the likes of Christopher Walken, Willem Dafoe, and even David Bowie had been sought for the role, Sheridan made for a suitable Flagg. He manages to convey the devilish wit, intimidating demeanor, and unpredictable temperament that King had intended with ease. I really only have one issue with this portrayal of Flagg, however, the blame cannot be laid at Sheridan's feet. It's that mullet, that mullet, though. Apparently, the head of the special effects department thought the wig gave Sheridan a more abrasive look, which I'm going to have to strongly disagree with. Like, give him long hair, sure, yeah, that could have worked, but not like this. Never like this. Special effects. The makeup effects in this series are all very well done, and one of the 2 Emmys this series won was for Outstanding Makeup. Especially considering it was all accomplished on a limited budget, the different Flagg variations, the aging makeup used for Mother Abigail, the burns on Trash Can Man, it's all expertly executed. There was some really cool green screen work done as well, specifically for Flagg's transformation from walking dude to demon monster. There are some excellent pyrotechnics and explosions too that are pretty rad. It's not until the climactic scene in Vegas during the final leg of the series that some not so great CGI is used, which for the time the series was made is actually pretty decent. It didn't age gracefully. However, considering the use of CGI was only employed briefly, it wasn't a deal breaker. It's just unfortunate that it had to be used during the pinnacle of the series. Soundtrack and score. The score for the miniseries was composed by W.G. Snuffy Walden, who had previously worked on The Wonder Years' Roseanne and would later go on to win an Emmy for the theme song for The West Wing. Walden used everything from reverb-soaked Southern-inspired acoustic guitars, heavenly angelic church choirs, piano balladry, full orchestras of dread-inducing strings, horns, and timpanis, and just about anything else you could imagine. It's a diverse and unique score that was done almost entirely with live instrumentation and virtually no lame-ass synth sounds, something I was very grateful for. A number of well-known classic rock songs make an appearance as well. Most famously, however, was the use of Blue Oyster Cult's Don't Fear the Reaper during one of the first scenes of the series, which takes us through the initial carnage of the outbreak at the military base, which is essentially Ground Zero. It's an iconic scene and use of the song. Final thoughts. This series is a must-see for fans of Stephen King and of the novel itself. It's not only one of the most loyal adaptations from the early King canon, the majority of the acting, music, and special effects are pretty damn good, which, let's be honest, isn't exactly typical for King screen adaptations of this era. Sure, it has some pacing issues at times, maybe a little bit of cheese, and of course, a bit of a time commitment, but if you're willing to spend the 40+ hours to read the book, it's worth taking another 8 to check out this series. Turns out you can watch the whole thing for free on YouTube. link in the description. Alright, in the next video I'll be taking a look at the comic book adaptation of The Stand, which was released over the course of 2008 through 2012, and features some truly gruesome illustrations. New videos drop on this channel every Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, so don't forget to click the bell and join me as I cover anything and everything Stephen King. Okay, goodbye. Be sure to click like and subscribe to the channel for my continued analysis of all things Stephen King, pretty pleased with blood and guts on top. My name is Mr. Doyle, and this has been a great undertaking.